I'm making another album, and so far, since I made the decision, it's hard to know when I exactly made the decision though, because the more I've got older and meditated more and coached more people, I've realised that it kind of more and more feels like decisions come upon me more than the I who does the thinking comes up with them, makes them. It's like they sort of appear. All right, this is what I'm doing. Rather than, I'm going to make 2 columns, and in A, I'm going to come up with all of the plus points to making an album, and in B, I'm going to come up with all the negatives to making albums. I just don't do that, ever, for any decision. Number one, because I believe you end up making worse decisions. And number 2, because often what will end up happening is you just get completely confused, overwhelmed, and don't make them at all, which is the worst decision. So instead, my decision-making process is more like things coalesce. And also, if they're not coalescing, I will put a date on the time the decision needs to be made, and then I'll just make it. Because that is the downside of allowing decisions to appear. So anyway, I'm not exactly sure when I made the decision, but it was probably between 1 and 2 weeks ago. And yesterday, just out of interest, I took a look at my in progress folder to see how much music I'd made, how many ideas I'd started since making the decision. And what was interesting is, without me even kind of really thinking about it, it's not like I'm starting an album and now I'm going to work hard at it, because this is month 0, where really I'm gathering and I'm being more relaxed about it. I'm kind of preparing for the album, so I'm not exactly writing it. And so, I haven't really been paying too much attention to what I need to make music every single day, because I've got a lot on my plate. And what's been interesting is, since making the decision, or since the decision happened, more accurately, I seem to have made music every day, which is following on from what I said in the last episode of this, where one of the best reasons one of the most important reasons to make an album is simply because it increases the likelihood you're actually going to do something. It's like you're creating the conditions where you will. Now, of course, at this point, it's fairly early on, and when you're starting anything, there's always an excitement period, and then there is what I call the trough of despair. I'm not sure what I call it, but anyway, it's called that by me and probably other people. And in that, you have the initial excitement. Right, I'm launching a podcast. I'm starting a new course. I'm doing a program. I'm stopping drinking alcohol. Whatever it might be. At first, it's actually, in most cases anyway, easier than the bit after the newness has started, at the top of despair. So because I've just recorded the first episode of this is the second episode, because literally yesterday, I announced it to the Magic Music Machine community, and so this is what I'm doing. It's all exciting. So it makes sense that I would be making music every day in these conditions. The important thing is going to be, okay, what am I going to do when it's no longer exciting? And one of the things that I'm doing is splitting up the album writing process into 3 main chunks, and the chunk I'm in right now, which is a kind of preparatory chunk. So chunk 1, preparation. What I'm doing at the moment is, what I did just today is essentially making ideas and really not putting a like it's very, very open. So I'm not going, right, it must be this, right? And I'm kind of exploring and investigating various different options of the kind of album I could make. So for instance, the splurge that I did, and by the way, what a splurge is just you make an idea and as fast as you possibly can without focusing on quality. And so the splurge that I did, in fact, the day before, the day before, just so happened that the machines were at 120 BPM. So I did one at 120 BPM. But then the day after, so yesterday, I did one and it was around 140 BPM. In fact, I think I might have done two yesterday because I did another. Yes, I did two yesterday. That's right. So there you go. I didn't even remember that I did two. Again, it's probably coming from the excitement of announcing it. And then this morning I thought, I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I don't know why, but I'm just going with it. I'm going to, every splurge I do, I'm going to go up by 5 BPM. Why? I don't know. Why not? That's really the feeling I have. I mean, there's an interesting thing about the higher tempos is that they start to become slow tempos at the same time. I mean, from my previous career, I would say that the majority of the music I make was house, techno, probably less techno, but it was, in the, I would say, 120 to 130 range-ish. I did make things slightly faster than that sometimes, but it was in that kind of a range. Thing is about that kind of range, when you go half time of that, it's really, really, really slow. It's like incredibly slow. Whereas when you start getting up into 150, 160, 170, 180, even 200, it's like the half time is actually quite energetic. And that is very interesting because it allows you a lot of freedom. It gives you a lot of things that you can do in terms of the pulse, the tempo of a piece of music, which are interesting. You can really change the feel, the colour of something, without just doing the half tempo thing. You can suggest, you can do a half tempo thing which suggests a much faster tempo, which I think, is one of the reasons I really enjoy going up in tempo, because it's like then you're kind of in any tempo, but especially when you start bringing triplets into it. And really the big question, I'm not too worried about at the moment, but it's kind of hanging there up in the air and slightly over to the right, is, am I going to sing on this album? So the reason, recently, in fact, I think my kind of not my first forays, but my most recent forays into singing have probably indirectly led to me deciding to do an album. Because when was it? I don't know. 6 weeks, 2 months ago or something, I was training my wonderful Make Music Your Life coaches. We meet every week and do a training session, and that's aside from the reviews and pre-session things that we do before all of the Magic Music Machine sessions. So I was doing a coach training session, and we were focused on how to coach, because coaching in itself is a thing. It's like a skill. Non-directive coaching. If you want to know about non-directive coaching, how coaching is different to teaching, because it's not teaching, then if you go to my PodWalk podcast and look at the episode Why I Became a Coach, and then I think there's an episode called Teaching versus Coaching, and then there's the following episode is called something like Consuming Information versus Creating Knowledge, or something like that. Those 3 episodes will really give you an understanding of the difference between teaching and coaching. Anyway, so I was teaching my coaches how to coach and how to do this non-directive thing that we do. And I decided to make myself the guinea pig and get actually each of them to, because there's 10 to 12 at any given time of them to ask me a single question. So it was like a kind of distributed coaching session where they would be asking me a question in order to help me solve a problem. And then at the end, I fed back to each of them on the questions that they asked and what, is this a good question? What was wrong with this question? That kind of thing. Anyway, the subject I decided to talk about was this singing bugbear that I have, monkey on my back. Because back when I was at school, I did singing lessons. I was in all kinds of choirs and stuff. I was in kind of almost every musical thing it was possible to be. So, jazz bands, orchestras, choirs, that kind of thing. I was a muso, and I then went to Oxford University and I got in on a choral scholarship, which meant I had to sing in the choir there as well. And then I was in all kinds of musicals and operas. I did other acting as well and music. So I was that kind of a fellow, and a bit of an idiot, to be honest. But anyway, even more so than today. So, I was young. So I have done a lot of singing in my life. And then when I started making house music, and it started out by being the very start of progressive house. Singing probably wasn't so much of a thing. It was kind of looked down upon. So I kind of stopped doing it. And then at some point, I was like, I think it was when it was sort of Daft Punk or something came through. I think it was when the Music Sounds Better With You, Stardust, that thing. And that started to become quite a thing. I was like, oh man, I could sing. And so this is really embarrassing. So I came up with this idea for a song, and it was, at the time, it was one of those ones where I thought, oh, because she's great. I sort of sang it into a mic in my bedroom. I thought, oh my God, this is great. It's going to be a hit. And got my friend, Lawrence, and we went and recorded it at this other friend's house. And I thought it was great at the time, totally unaware. And then basically, the long and short of it, it was absolutely appalling. Not only the way I was singing it, the words, it was just awful. It was literally, oh dear. It's just, and it became this thing because Lawrence, who's one of my best friends, but he's definitely got a kind of certain sense of humour, kept on saying, because he had the tape. He says, I've got the tape. I'm going to release it. I was like, no. This was back when I cared about that kind of thing. And it became this kind of thing, my singing. I was like, oh God. I really wanted to do it, but that kind of experience and just doing it and kind of making such an error, and also doing it and recording it, and actually other musicians being there and hearing it and what they must have thought. It's just the whole, So, and to be honest with you, that experience has taught me a lot about, experiences like that are what led, not just that one, but many of them are what led to my understanding about how our opinion is not to be attached to, because it changes all the time. And you can be very, very wrong. Yeah. In fact, I'm just going to do it. It's probably a good thing to, like, for instance, one of the lyrics in this song was, fever, you give me disco fever. What was it? It's something like, you ain't no disco diva. Something. Oh my goodness. Anyway, yes, I did at one point think that was a good idea. So as you can see, that was a very clear example of my opinion being completely and utterly out of whack with reality. And you make me scream and shout. That's what. God, it's going through my head now. Fever. Oh, you the disco diva. You gotta hear me yell. Oh my God, it's awful. Anyway, so there you go. I have now, by actually releasing it in air quotes in public, beaten Lawrence to it, and I've just walked through a spider's web. I need a stick to wave in front of my face. Sorry, this happens almost every time I record a podcast and I forget. But it was because I was engaged in a little bit of personal therapy on the podcast by singing this terrible song to the world. So anyway, yes, I'm actually grateful for experiences like that, because it without them, I wouldn't have realised all of the things, many of the things that I've realised, which have helped me help so many other people. Your opinion is changing all the time, which is what makes the creative process so bloody hard. One of the things that makes the creative process so bloody hard. So anyway, fast forward to I don't know, when I came back to making music, and I came back to making music after 8 years or something, and I had a break, not because of that track. I made many pieces of music after that absolutely appalling disco fever nightmare, but it was for other reasons, which I'll go into at some other point. But I came back to making music after having coached for 8 years or something, because I felt I had solved. When I say solved, that doesn't make the creative process immediately easy, but I had solved many of the problems that stopped me making music in the first place. Or at least I knew the solution to the problems. I still had to implement them and practice them and all that kind of stuff. But I knew in X situation, I knew I could do Y. Yeah? And in A situation, I knew I could do B. I had solutions to pretty much all of the things that completely screwed with my mind when I'd been making music in the previous 17 years, well, not the previous 17 years, but the previous 17 years before the 8-year break. So I came back to making music, and really at the start, it was just like, oh, wow, look how in this 8 years, music technology has changed and altered, and right, it's just absolutely incredible. It's amazing. There are so many things you can do. What's everyone complaining about? One of the things I thought, like, why is everyone so like, oh my God, this is really hard? Because like back when I was making music previous, for instance, you couldn't put too many plugins on something in a DAW. You couldn't do it because it would make it sound worse, right? It was like the sound quality wasn't there. It actually, you had to be really, you had to have a very light touch if you were putting plugins on, and that had completely shifted. So many of the kind of filing and issues had been sorted. I remember like downloading and updating software was a billion times easier. It just completely blew my mind. Everything sounded so much better. There was so many more kind of press this button and you'll have an amazing sound, which you can change very easily just by changing a few sliders. So it was like everything was easier, quicker, and higher quality, and cheaper as well. I was like, oh, it's just incredible. So I wasn't thinking about singing at all. So I made this album to begin in, it wasn't 100% within a month, but the majority of it was done in a month. There was a few changes I did at the end when I realised, for instance, a couple of the tracks were actually terrible, which I thought were good. So I swapped them out. So I made the begin, and then after that, I moved on to, it was a little bit later, I started thinking about actually one of the things that I really wanted to do. In fact, this is what I ended my previous music career. Like, the big thing I wanted to do was make electronic music live, and I did actually do a couple of gigs, which I'll talk about at another time. One in Denmark, which was amazing, brilliant. I did this live thing, and then one in Miami at the Winter Music Conference at the Apple Store with a bunch of other big producers, and it was an absolute disaster. It was, again, another of those unutterably awful experiences of my life, which I'll tell you about another time. So again, this was another thing that I desperately wanted to do and never got to do. So I started doing that, and started the Zentor thing, where I live streamed a new piece of music every single day for goodness knows how long. I counted it up in the end. And out of that kind of 18-month period, this was over the pandemic, I made 524 pieces of music. Because the way I think about it when I'm playing live isn't that I'm improvising. It's not that I'm jamming. It's that I'm live composing. I think of it like that because what I was attempting to do every day was make a piece of music that worked as a piece of music. So that was kind of my focus at that point. And then I actually took a break for a couple of months for various different reasons. And when I came back to it again, I came back to the thing I was doing before, which was mainly sort of piano and some electronics. And it was like, I need something more challenging. Yeah, I need more. I need something that is pushing me in some way. And this is where singing came into my head again. I was like, I've still not done this singing thing. In fact, one of my clients, when I was coaching them, less so now, but when I was coaching them, they were writing a bunch of songs, and we would, the coaching sessions that we did were largely about the lyrics of her songs, and just through that process, I realised a lot of stuff about writing lyrics, and I felt that I could do it. So over this period, I'd also been doing what I call lyric splurges, where I literally just get usually a phone and notes, notes on my iPhone, and just write whatever. I know it's lyrics, so it's often rhyming and stuff like that, but I just write whatever comes out for 5 minutes, and there's a bunch of stuff that comes out of that. So I was interested in doing that, and I thought, well, that would be the ideal challenge. So in this coaching session that was a long detour, wasn't it? Anyway, so in this coaching session with the coaches, basically the question that we started with was, what is I think it was this anyway, if I'm incorrect, it was something like this. What is the number one problem to solve that would make all other problems, if you solved it, would make all other problems, in this area, so for instance, in my case, in making music, easier or irrelevant? Easier, simpler, quicker, or irrelevant? So this is like the highest leverage problem. And in this coaching session, I realized it was, for me, the singing thing. Because what I found with a lot of my music was that in order to make it as simple as it can be, the quickest way of doing that, if I could sing, and if I could write lyrics, and if I could have a melody over the top sung by someone, then, i.e. me, then that would allow, it's almost like you can do a lot less. I mean, a couple of my favourite artists, 3 of my favourite artists, Prince, James Blake, and Tom York. I love Radiohead, but specifically Tom York doing his solo thing. I love that stuff. Actually, the Electric Lady Studios sessions where he sings with a piano and a couple of bits of, I think, loopers and stuff, and maybe a bit of modular. I don't exactly know what he's got in there, but anyway, those are some of my favourite bits of music. And it's like that the vocal really, really carries it. It's like it's the central focus in all 3 of those cases. I mean, of course, in Prince's case, there's a lot. I mean, in fact, in all of them, there's a lot else that's going on, but the vocal is the kind of central element, and that allows for much more simplicity elsewhere, which is something I was really craving. And it's not that you can't have simplicity without a vocal. Of course you can. It's just that if the vocal is killer, both lyrically and melodically, and by the way, the performance doesn't have to be unbelievably amazing. You don't have to be an amazing singer for this to work. So, I mean, there are some amazing singers. Another of my favourite artists is Jamie Liddell. And in fact, all of the people I've mentioned are amazing singers, incredible singers. But you don't have to be an amazing singer for this to happen. I mean, another example would be Lou Reed, who was an amazing singer in a way, but not like who wouldn't say, oh, he was technically incredible, right? So I realised that not only was like using my voice a solution to this problem, and by the way, I didn't want to use other singers because that would actually make a lot of other things more complicated, right? So I've got a very, very limited amount of time to make music in my life, extremely limited. It's ridiculous. And so I need something which is I need to set up or make my music around that assumption that I don't have a lot of time. This is the mistake a lot of people make, is that they want to make music that can only be done in a lot of time. I mean, they can still do it quickly relative to itself. So in other words, they can work quickly, but the making of that music takes a long time because of what they've chosen to do. And they don't realize that actually they have chosen for it to take a long time. So what I'm looking for is the kind of music, one of the, not the only, but one of the ways that I want to decide what I do is that it takes less time, because that's the amount of time I have, and I want to make music, and I want to finish it, and I want it to be good, and I want it to be released. So therefore, what I do has to take little time, right? That's a more rational way of figuring out what your music to be, rather than, I want to write operas. Yeah, I mean, if you want to write operas, go ahead, for sure. But recognise that's going to take a certain amount of time. I want to use the London Symphony Orchestra in every tune. But that's just going to take a lot of time and a lot of money, right? And if you don't have it, then why do you have to do that? Yeah. So time is definitely something that I'm using to figure out what is my music going to be. And if I'm able to sing with quality lyrics, much better than disco fever, but if I'm able to come up with a quality song with a great melody, and the performance be, if not technically great, sort of have something that means that it is great, right? Think, Bruce Springsteen, not necessarily technically great, but got something that makes it great, right? So that kind of thing. If I can do that, then I will be able to make both the kind of music that kind of creates the kind of experience for people I want, but also the amount of music to make some kind of an impact on the world, but probably more accurately on myself. Because one of the things I've noticed is that when I feel like I'm going somewhere, it's much easier to find the limited time that I have, or use the limited time that I have to make music. So I decided to pull out my microphone and try some stuff, and I was noodling around for a long time. I mean, I have actually made quite a bit of progress, and I'm doing various different things to try and actually find a unique way of doing it. I've been playing around with, I thought, well, what if I did the Zentor thing, because with the Zentor thing, I was live composing pieces of music, instrumental music with a few machines. At some points it was just a piano. Other points there was 3 Moog semi-modular things at the same time. So I was live composing these instrumental pieces. So what if I did the same thing with voice? How cool would it be to simply just live compose a song? That would be cool. And I started doing some of that, and actually a couple of the pieces that have come from that process could well, I don't know yet, could well end up on the album. They literally, I just sang them and they're there. So, morning. So that's what I was doing. And then I also was playing with an auto-tune plugin and using it to, like in conjunction with the piano, with a few via MIDI, to actually play around with determining what notes that are being played on the piano, and also if I could maybe have two signals coming in so that I have a kind of duet, one of just my voice alone and one of the auto-tune voice. So you kind of got a duet between this robotized thing and just the kind of pure signal. So I've been doing various different things, but it wasn't kind of working towards something. It wasn't working towards a particular thing. It was quite difficult to zero in on what I wanted to do because I didn't have a specific project I was working towards with a deadline. So the question I have now, because the last few splurges that I've done, I've just been doing instrumental splurges, which if I choose to use the voice, I will then do another splurge. I'll do a vocal splurge over the top of it. So that will be my like discovery section. If I choose to use the voice, that's what I would do with those. But then there's this other approach that I've been taking where it's like literally just of me playing the piano and singing at the same time. Sometimes with this auto-tune thing that I'm doing, and sometimes without, where I'm kind of just improvising a song. And I mean, I think I've just talked myself into it actually. So I think I do have to in some way use the voice. Now what the voice ends up being, whether it ends up being just little samples and of little snippets here and there, or whether they end up being fully fledged songs, that remains to be seen, because now that I've got the deadline of let's say the start of April, because I think the first week in, I'm not actually going to start the album like really right. I'm starting the album proper. That's not going to be until the kind of second week of January. So giving myself 3-4 week chunks from that point to complete it. So within that deadline, what the vocal component of the album ends up being will depend on how good the things are that I end up recording. So it could be anything from just a little vocal snippet to a fully fledged song. I doubt highly, in fact, I don't think I want to do this anyway, that every single track on the album will be a fully fledged song. What I would expect, although you never know, is that there will be a couple of fully fledged songs and then some instrumentals and then maybe a couple of kind of instrumentals with little vocal snippets. But I don't really know. I don't know yet. And this is the point of this chunk, this stage, where I'm kind of leaving it very open. So what I'm doing at the moment is that I'm starting a splurge and I'm either doing an instrumental one or I'm starting with just a piano and this synth thing that I use in my voice. And with the latter, I've started doing it with just a very simple rhythm, so that if I choose to make it, a rhythmic thing, it's not, because with a lot of the piano and vocal ones, before there was no click track whatsoever. It's just completely free. So yeah, I've got all, these different ways of approaching it, and I'm splurging at the moment at least once a day. I think maybe what I will aim to do from this point, as a result of this conversation I've been having with you, thank you very much. What I'll aim to do is do one instrumental splurge and one vocal splurge with just the piano. And do one of those every day, and probably in a couple of weeks see where I end up, or hear where I end up maybe. Okay, well, this has been a very long and involved episode about my album writing. I hope you found it interesting and useful. Do I have time to do another splurge? I probably do. I'm going to do a quick vocal splurge now, because you can probably hear that I'm now in my studio, because they don't take very long at all, these vocal ones. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to wish you a good day and say onwards and upwards.